December the 13th, 1981. A hurricane is brewing in the English Channel.
So in the middle of the channel we had a hell of a weather. 9-meter high waves at the beginning, at lunchtime. We were rolling like hell.
John Aisha was the chief engineer aboard the 8,000-ton Ecuadorian cargo ship Bonita. She was carrying fertilizer from Hamburg to Panama when she hit a hurricane just north of the Channel Islands.
But suddenly we had two big waves at the sides, and it felt for me like one big wave hit the flat bottom. So, and I said, hell, didn't we come up again?
Some 40 miles to the south, on the island of Guernsey, the St. Peter Port lifeboat volunteers were about to sit down to their Sunday lunches when they received a routine call. Among them was Peter Bugord.
There was a naval ship in the harbour in danger of breaking adrift or perhaps being blown down on the lifeboat. So I said to Annie, well, this shouldn't take long.
But out in the channel, the Bonita's cargo had shifted, making her unstable. Rolling heavily and taking on water, she was being battered by 3-story waves and was starting to list.
When I came to the bridge, there was completely chaos. The captain and his wife and the child they were all sliding down to the starboard side of the bridge door, and they were laying down there. And I said, forget the ship, call for a mayday.
At St. Peter Port, coxswain Michael Scales responded to the mayday call. He and his 7 crew members headed out into the hurricane. They would not be returning for lunch that day. John Webster was among the crew.
We immediately appreciated the weather that it was blowing. It was a low water, big spring tide, and it wasn't going to be very nice. And without Sunday lunch, we were going sort of mid-channel. But somebody was in trouble, so we launched.
Conditions were quite horrendous, really. The further we went, of course it got, because we left the lee of the island. By the time we got to the casualty, it was 40, 45-foot swells, and still getting worse, actually.
While the lifeboat and 2 Navy helicopters were on their way, the Bonita's list increased to 45 degrees.
In the meantime, the first assistant engineer, he had slide on deck, and he hit the railing in such a speed that he crushed both his leg. And later on we found out he had 48 fractures in his leg. And 1 hour after we capsized, the first helicopter came out. So this was very, very dangerous. But after some tap, he had the captain's wife and little child, 2-year-old child, and 1 cook and 1 other guy. So 4 people was taken into a helicopter. And then we got a message that we will not be, they couldn't help us with the helicopter, but they told us that lifeboat was underway.
For the moment, the lifeboat, named the Sir William Arnold, was the only hope.
I was very pleased with myself, quite to be absolutely honest, because we were given a position where she was then. And I guesstimated her drift, and in actual fact we were only 10 minutes late, and I had to change course at the scene of the position I'd been given by 5 degrees, and we found her. If you know the lifeboat is coming, you're a much happier man than wondering what's going to happen next. And this is why I hated being late to casualties, because if you say you're going to get there at 4:10 and you still haven't got there at 4:15, they start to think, are they really coming?
Crew members Alan Martell, John Bugord and Richard Hammond will always remember the scene that greeted them.
I think the
I
boat...
think we've all got memories.
Yeah.
I think one of the things was really approaching it, eh? Just sort of stuck out in your mind, apart from the weather, which was horrendous, but it was to see
a boat like that on its
photograph
side.
is just like a dead whale, almost.
Yeah.
White dead whale, just laying wallowing in the sea.
Yeah.
The actual boat rolling so violently, the wings of the bridge were in the sea.
Yeah.
Well, we circled it just to take it all in, really.
It was hard to believe that a boat could roll like that without actually going over it. It's exposing its propeller and rudder, and then rolling back. It was quite something else.
Yeah.
The lifeboat crew realised that the safest way to get close to the survivors was to approach the ship's stern. The noise of the wind and spray rendered radio communications almost useless.
With the aid of a searchlight, we started to ask them to flick them with the searchlight and keep coming down the light. So some of them walked to the stern of the boat on the outside of the rails.
The electrician and me, we tried to help the second engineer with the crushed legs, so he could not walk. So we made ropes and we dragged him over deck. And I will mention that the ship at this time had more than 45 degrees, and it was still rolling, and we had to take him down ladders. I saw on hatch number 3 there was a motorman there. He was laying there with his broken bone, and bone was going up to his shoulder, and he was laying there. And the steward was standing there with white gloves. He failed, and the sea took him, and he went into the bulkhead and railing, and the next time I saw him, his head was away.
3 of the Bonita's crew prepared to jump onto the deck of the lifeboat, but one of them mistimed his jump and suffered a serious head injury when he landed. Coxswain Michael Scales decided on a new tactic. He would get close enough for his crew to throw a heaving line to the Bonita and pull the survivors aboard the lifeboat. At the front of the lifeboat were John Bugord and Peter Bugord, who threw the heaving line in the raging seas.
Take men of more words than me to do it proper justice, I think, but there's the shrieking of the wind in the rigging, there's the driving sleet and snow going along horizontally, the spray. Oh, I've got mental first snapshots in my mind which have never changed, never left me.
On the deck, preparing to pull people aboard, were Alan Martell, John Webster and Richard Hammond. On the exposed bridge was coxswain Michael Scales at the helm, and Peter Bisson, who operated the searchlight. Mechanic Bob Vowles was in the wheelhouse, in charge of communications and tending to the injured crew member.
Well, it was 2 women and 2 children were the first into the water, and the rest of the people still on the boat could see then that they were on the lifeboat very, very quickly. And they then they all realised that that's the way they were going to have to go. If they were going to be rescued, they were going to have to jump in the water.
After working for hours in sub-zero temperatures, hurricane-force winds and massive waves, the volunteers managed to pull 16 people aboard the lifeboat. Coxswain Scales decided to give his crew a brief respite.
Then they were so exhausted, the crew on the lifeboat, that they just left us and they went up against the weather and they just were laying there. And then we thought that, okay, they cannot do anymore.
We backed off for 10 or 15 minutes. A couple of the crew who smoked had a smoke.
Well, for myself, it was a question of being able to bring my trousers back up because they were down around my knees inside my oil skins. Most uncomfortable.
We sort of got the adrenaline back in our cells and we carried on.